Okay, guys, so let's review for Hamlet for the test. And I want to just kind of go over some of the themes that are brought out in the play and kind of take a larger look at it. How many of you guys have read the play Macbeth? So Macbeth is in English too, so most of you guys have read that. And if you remember, at the beginning of the play, Macbeth, it starts off with people talking about Macbeth. And he's just fought this battle, and he apparently gutted this guy, literally ripped his insides out with a sword and cut him from the navel all the way to his throat. And one of the characters uses the phrase that he unseamed this person. So if you think about seam, you think about sewing to keep something together. So what does it mean to unseam something? In this case, it means literally to eviscerate somebody, to rip their body open and spill out their guts. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I want to show you guys how Shakespeare does this really uncanny job of thematizing his work right at the beginning. So whenever you read the setup of a Shakespeare play, you have to really be in tune because he's always giving us clues and stuff about things that are going to come back. And if we look at it deeply and closely, we'll see those patterns come in and out of the play. So in the context of that play, the rest of the play is really about Macbeth being unseamed. It's about opening up this man and really seeing what's inside him. But on the other hand, he literally gets kind of ripped apart emotionally and physically throughout the play. Macbeth is probably, maybe with the exception of Titus Andronicus, I would probably say it's his most violent play. It's also his shortest, whereas Hamlet is his longest play. And then later on in the play, it's prophesied that Macbeth cannot be killed by a woman or a man born of woman, right? So he becomes really arrogant throughout the play. And in the end, he gets killed by somebody that was born through C-section. So they were taken out of the womb, which kind of goes back to this idea here of pulling someone apart. So if you guys remember the way Hamlet examines the question of fatalism, Hamlet will say later in the play that we defy augury, that we cannot predict what's going to happen to us. And to a large extent, the play Hamlet is really about letting go. We have a guy who loses his father in the opening of the play. And by the end of the play, he's let that go. Now the paradox, the contradiction here, Shakespeare never gives us an easy out because at the same time, even though he lets go, he also goes out in a flurry of violence. So on one hand, he's saying, I'm going to let go. But on the other hand, he's taking action. And he unleashes a bloodbath. Really, a bloodbath gets unleashed when Claudius kills his father. So we'll get back to that, this question of fate, fatalism. Now, the opening of the play starts with one character telling another character early in the wee hours of the morning when it's dark outside and foggy. He tells a character to unfold himself. Stand and unfold yourself. Now, if you think about it, the word unfold is really quite similar to the word unseen. There's been a lot of discussion over the years about whether or not Shakespeare was really one person. Because could one person have had this unbelievable intellect? Could one person do what Shakespeare did with the way, he exhibits knowledge of multiple languages through his work, or the fact that he understands the intricate workings of the court, or that he can understand how falconry works, or all this stuff about shit. You do kind of see these little things like that, unseen, unfold. You see similarities of language that Shakespeare returns to a lot in his plays. And in my opinion, even certain words that he likes to use. In my opinion, that would be kind of indicative of a single author. The fact that it is one single mind, one single genius mind that we're looking at. So the play, to a large extent, is going to be about Shakespeare or Hamlet unfolding himself. And at the same time, you might say that it's actually Shakespeare unfolding himself. We don't know a lot about William Shakespeare, but what we do know was that around the time that he wrote Hamlet, he lost a son. And his son was named what, guys? Right. So, if you look at the word Hamlet, and we take out the N and add an L in there, we've got the name of the son in this play. We also know that in the actual first performance of the play, that the character that played King Hamlet, or the ghost of King Hamlet in the play, was Shakespeare. And when he appears on the stage, there's a trapdoor that opens up. And they use that a lot in Shakespeare. I would imagine that maybe when they're doing the burial scene later, maybe they use the trapdoor too. But the ghost of King Hamlet emerges from the ground, played by none other than Shakespeare. And you might say that that was Shakespeare emerging from his own grief, getting his feelings out there into the world. Nobody knows. There was no Rolling Stone interview with Shakespeare. I mean, it would have been cool to read a 20-page interview where Shakespeare just talks about his body of work. But we'll never have that. We only have the work. Only the work survives. But that's enough. That's all we need, because it's a pretty good body of work. So, at the very beginning of the play, Hamlet sees his father's ghost, and his father's ghost tells him to remember him. After he tells him all the information about what happened to him, how he was poisoned in the garden, and that he was killed by his brother, he tells him, remember me. And Hamlet says, I will remember you as long as memory holds a seat in this distracted globe. That's one of my favorite double entendres, one of my favorite puns in all of Shakespeare, the globe. Because remember, I've said this before, but just to review. We're watching this play on the Globe Theater, right? So Shakespeare is having this sort of self-reflexive moment where we realize that the character is acknowledging that he's on the stage. As long as memory holds a seat in this distracted globe, as long as someone's sitting here watching this play, or in a larger sense, as if Shakespeare could predict that these plays would live on after him, as long as someone's reading these plays, I will hold your memory alive. So in a way, it's kind of like Shakespeare's keeping his son alive in that way, if you really want to get philosophical that way. But the other thing that's going on here is the mention of the skull. The shape of the skull as being like an arena for thought, the realm where the memory dwells. Remember later on in the play, Hamlet says, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself dreams. You see how the language is always working here? A king of infinite space, the son of a king. Those 1,000 natural shocks that the flesh is heir to. All throughout the play, the language talks about that burden of being the son of the king, being heir to the throne. And that is another one of the big themes in the play. The legacy that our parents leave upon us, that we carry around with us. And the legacy that we bear on our shoulders whenever we lose somebody that we love. At the end of the play, Horatio picks up the poison chalice and he says, I'm going to drink it. And he gets ready to drink the poison. He says, I'm more of a Roman than a Dane. The Romans thought that suicide was noble. He's about to drink the poison. Hamlet stops him. And he asks him, he says, I need you to tell my story. And he says something about, I need you to draw your breath in pain to tell my story. So Horatio's the one at the end of the play that survives to tell the story. He's the one that bears the legacy to carry it on. He's the memory that will hold the seat in the distracted globe. Now, the other part about the skull that we have to remember is Yorick's skull. So, by the time we get to the end of the play, we have that moment where Hamlet stumbles into the graveyard and he has the really great discussion with the gravedigger. And then, as The gravedigger is digging graves out. He throws his skull out. Hamlet just kind of carelessly picks it up and starts to look at it. And he says, whose skull is this? And the gravedigger says it was Yorick's skull. And Hamlet has a moment of like, in spite of the fact that he's just returned with this like newfound coolness that he has in the end of the play, he's like bewildered by that. He holds the skull up. He says, I knew him, Horatio. He was a fellow of infinite jest. He hath borne me on his back 1,000 times. But now how abhorrent in my imagination it is. My gorge rises at it. He has this visceral reaction where he literally feels like he's going to throw up. He's going to puke. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of how in the beginning of the play, the earth kind of pukes his father back up. You know, when Hamlet uses some really specific language there, where he talks about the jaws of the sepulchre opening and spitting out his father. And there's this theme in the play that something rotten cannot rest. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Foul deeds will rise, though all the earth overwhelms them to men's eyes. There's this idea that corruption will come out. Now, there's no easy answer in this play because Hamlet doesn't swiftly clean up the garden. You know, it's a huge avalanche of violence. And at the end of the play, how many people did we count were dead? Like 10 people or something like that? So, there is no easy way to look at this. But Hamlet looks at Yorick's skull, and he also says he was a fellow of infinite jest. This is one of my favorite lines in the play. He was a fellow of infinite jest. Now, if you think about it, infinite means infinity, so never ending, right? In jest means to joke. It can either be a jest, in which case it's a noun that means a joke, or it can be to jest, in which case it's a verb which means to joke. Human beings are infinite jesters. We're infinite jokers. We do have sense of humor. Now, earlier in the play, Hamlet gives a speech about what a piece of work is a man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, form and moving, how express and admirable, how like an angel. And I can't remember that exact quote. But what he finally says there, and yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Okay, so the quintessence of dust. Quintessence means like the ultimate essence. Quintessential. Once again, we're seeing the magnificence of Shakespeare's language, because on one thing, it's saying like our essence is that of dust. But he's also saying that the quintessential thing about humanity is the fact that we're going to be reduced to dust. It says in the Bible that from dust you come and to dust you shall return. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So is that the infinite jest? Is that the ultimate joke? That we are these radiant machines, and at the same time, there's this kind of limited time span on these machines. They're going to malfunction. They're going to break down on a cellular level. They're going to dissolve. Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. As Hamlet says at the beginning of the play. Now, you can analyze what the infinite jest is. Is the joke on humanity that, hey, you get this awesome life, but guess what? The universe doesn't care. You're going to go back down to dust. Or is the joke on the universe that, hey, you can try to spit me out and just chew me up and disregard me and relegate me to absolutely nothing, but because of memory and the distracted glow, and humanity, and tenderness and love, and loyalty, maybe the joke's on the universe that we can keep it alive and do something greater than just fizzle away. We live on in love. We live on the actions that we did, the choices that we made. Hamlet makes some pretty bad choices in this play. He's cruel to Ophelia. He's cruel to his mother. He unleashes an avalanche of violence. But at the same time, he did leave that garden. You know? And if the garden represents the fallen state of humankind, because we have this parallel between the Garden of Eden and the rotten garden in Denmark, with fratricide, killing of a brother, and the serpent in the garden, then maybe Hamlet does what's right. But it's not an easy choice for Hamlet because he has the conscience, which brings us back to the to be or not to be speech. Thus, the native hue of resolution is sicklied over with pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. There's consequences for our conscience, guys. But it's that conscience lurking in our distracted globe that separates us from all the other animals. Remember what Hamlet says. What good is a man if the chief goal of his time is but to sleep and eat? He is a beast, nothing more. He refers to human beings as being the paragon of animals. So this conscience, this burden of thought, it's not easy, guys. But it is the thing that makes us human. And the quintessential question of all of Shakespeare's work, as I've been telling you since day one, is what does it mean to be human? And if we can find that out in literature, I think it can help us be better people. So that's the point of literature, to feed the soul, to make us a little bit wiser. So I think that's kind of all I really want to say about the play before we start reviewing on the specific test. Is there anything else you guys want to comment on or want clarification on or don't understand or anything? We could talk about this play for weeks. In fact, we have been talking about this play for weeks. But we're finally done, guys. And you just got through the longest Shakespeare play. And probably his most challenging piece. I would probably say King Lear's more challenging. But Hamlet is definitely up there. And you can get through anything. Once you get through Shakespeare, you can get through anything. So, the test looks like this. There's going to be one section where you have to write about the main characters. So you have to be able to tell me about Horatio, the ghost, King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, Polonius, Laertes, Ophelia, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And then you don't have to write a lot about these guys, but you should know who Yorick is, the Gravedigger, and Fortinbras. So, who's the character that carries on the burden of the distracted globe and memory at the end of the play?
I'm not trying to disrail you. From back here, I thought it said memory holds a scat in this distracted globe.
Well, that's Hamlet too.
Either way.
Right. You're thinking of a different play.
Oh, I see
that. Which character carries the burden in the end?
Do you mean like who takes over after?
Good question. That's not what I meant. But yeah, I meant Horatio. Now, you're right. Fortinbras is the one that carries on afterwards. 3 avenging sons in this play, right? Who are they? Laertes, Hamlet, and Fortinbras. Right. Be careful there.
Yeah, it's all
We all know who the ghost is, right? Okay. Do you guys see the theme of fathers and sons in this play? Now, women, you might read this play and be like, well, this is a macho play. What about all the women? Well, you do have 2 very, very interesting women in this play. Gertrude and Ophelia. Gertrude's a survivor, in my opinion. She does what she has to survive. She knows that she has no real power in this society. It's a patriarchal society, with men being kings, being the rulers, right? Now, Ophelia really personifies that struggle. She tries to be an independent woman, and she does a great job at it. She's very, very clever. She's very loving. She's nurturing. She's a good character. She can deal with her brother. She can deal with her boyfriend's mood swings. She can deal with her overbearing father. She does an amazing job of juggling those men, all three of whom are obsessed with her sex life. Her brother tells her to not open her chaste treasure to Hamlet. Her father tells her not to listen to Hamlet. Hamlet sexually flirts with her 1 minute and then tells her to go to a nunnery in the next. She deals with this brilliantly. But then she has her breaking point. You know, everybody has a breaking point. And your boyfriend kills your dad, that might be the thing that pushes you over the edge.
Did she ever find out that Hamlet was the one that killed him?
Yeah, she did. She never says it, but you kind of assume she puts it together. Yeah. So, yeah, I think you guys know all those characters. Now, one part on the test is going to be where I read you guys a quote, and you tell me who said it. You're going to have Laertes, Polonius, Gertrude, Ophelia, Horatio, Claudius, the ghost, and you're going to use Hamlet 3 times. So, I'm going to read you guys a quote, and you tell me which character said it, all right? If you want to jot notes down on these, they're not in order, but these are going to be the ones that are going to be on the test. Who says this? It is here, Hamlet. Hamlet, thou art slain. No medicine in the world can do thee good. In thee there is not half an hour's life. The treacherous instrument is in thy hand, unbaited and envenomed. The foul practice hath turned itself on me. Lo, here I lie, never to rise again. Thy mother's poisoned. I can no more. The king's to blame. Laertes. That's Laertes when he says, Hamlet, thou art slain. When he tells him, you just got poisoned, buddy. And so did I, by the way. We're both screwed right now.
Wait, what was it? What was Hamlet what?
Laertes.
Oh, I know, but you said something.
Hamlet, thou art slain.
Yeah.
All right. If you guys missed this one, you're going to fight. You're going to step outside and fight right now. So you have to face the fire. If you don't know it, raise your hand and we step outside and fight. And we go back. All right, here we go. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. A fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. He hath bore me on his back 1,000 times. And now how abhorred in my imagination it is. Who says it? Hamlet. Poor Yorick. Poor Yorick. Hamlet talking about Yorick's skull there.
I'm writing like little pieces of stuff.
Hey, I told you you could do whatever.
We use this on the test.
Yes, sir. Open notes. Who says this? Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day thou canst not then be false to any man. That's somebody giving a very long speech to another character when they leave to go back to school. It's a character that never shuts up
Polonius.
until Hamlet shuts him up. Polonius, right. He's given that famous speech, to thine own self be true. And then it can only follow that you'll be true to other people as well. It's a really ironic speech. It gets misquoted out of context all the time, because that's the speech where basically he says, be true to yourself. But at the same time, we know Polonius is incredibly selfish. Who says this? Good Hamlet. Just the voice alone should give you a pretty good hint. Cast thy nighted colour off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou knowest 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity.
Gertrude.
Yes, that's Gertrude. Cast thy nighted colour off. I actually like that speech because it's sort of eloquent and beautiful in a way. She says, you can't forever seek for thy noble father in the dust. You have to let go. She says, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. One gets the sense that as a grieving widow here, she's moving on pretty quick. But at the same time, you might think, hey, she's a female. She knows what it takes to survive. She's going to have to move from him to Claudius to keep her own power in this play. Who says this? Not a whit we defy augury. There is a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Let be. Who's ready at the end? Who says to let go? Hamlet. That's Hamlet. And the famous reference there, guys, to their special providence in the fall of a sparrow. He's basically saying, if the book of Matthew claims that God knows even when a sparrow falls, then he must know when I'm going to fall. Remember I talked about Hamlet getting quasi-religious at the end a little bit? All right, here we go. I shall the effect of this good lesson keep as watchman to my heart. But good my brother, do not as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven, while, like a puffed and reckless libertine, himself the primrose path of dalliance treads, and recks not his own reed. Ophelia, you even see the word there, brother. Yeah. Good my brother.
So wait, is the whole quote going to be on the test?
I'll speak it to you, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So guys, that's a beautiful quote, because that shows you how tough and smart Ophelia is. Because she basically calls her brother out for being a hypocrite. She's like, I'll do everything you say, but don't show me the steep and hard way to heaven, while you yourself take the easy way. If you're going to lecture me, be sure you live that same life. And I like how she says, I will keep that lesson as watchman to my heart. Like, thanks for watching out for my heart. It's almost like you can sense that maybe she's dripping with a little bit of irony there when she says those things. Who says this? Before my God I might not this believe without the sensible and true avouch of mine own eyes. Who's the character that has to see things with their own eyes? Who's the rationalist? Horatio. Remember, Hamlet says to him later, there are greater things of heaven and earth, Horatio, than are mentioned in your philosophy. Horatio is the witness character. To the very end, he will carry that burden. And in that moment, he says, I would not have believed this if I didn't see it, man. Who says this? Brief let me be. Sleeping within my orchard, my custom always of the afternoon, upon my secure hour thy uncle stole, with juice of cursed Habona in a vial, and in the porches of my ears did pour the leprous distilment. King Hamlet. In the porches of my ears, talking about how he's poisoned through the ear. Who says this? My offense is rank, it smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it, a brother's murder. Pray can I not, though inclination be sharp as will. Who has the primal eldest curse of a brother's murder on them? Claudius. Pray can I not. That moment of honesty where Claudius admits that he can't pray. He tries. I think that's... Whoop, got one more here. Was that 10? Will this next one be 10?
Yeah.
Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seems to me all the uses of this world. Hamlet, the ultimate depression speech. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. For a guy that's like stagnant right there and cannot take action, to a guy that in the end is in a sword fight that ends up killing all these people, We do see, I love the fact that we see him go into action, but it's not like this triumphant victory like in the Karate Kid or something like that. It's a painful, messy victory. There's no easy way out in this play. The next part of the test is a bunch of simple questions. When I mean simple, it's just like basic things from the plot. Why does Hamlet's father tell him he needs to act quickly when he says to kill his uncle? Basically, he's suffering in the meantime. He's like, I'm burning until you take care of this for me. Why does Polonius send his servant to where Laertes is going to school? Remember when Polonius goes back to school after Act 1, and Polonius sends his servant to go out there? Do you remember?
To spy on.
Yeah, basically to spy on his own son. Polonius loves spying. He's a very nosy guy. Very nosy guy. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern get brought to Elsinore to keep an eye on Hamlet and find out what's wrong. And then by the end of the play, they're carrying out a murder execution order. And then by the end of the play, Hamlet's killed them, had them killed. How would you describe Hamlet's behavior to Ophelia throughout the play? Erratic. Great way to put it. Up and down. Mercurial. Fluctuating.
Random. It doesn't have like, it just goes everywhere.
What scene does Hamlet have the traveling actors put on?
Traveling what?
Traveling actors.
Do you mean the mousetrap?
Yes.
Okay.
Y'all remember the mousetrap, right? Act out the murder. That's where the play gets really into some great discussions about the nature of art. Hamlet says art should be a mirror that you hold up to nature.
Not two.
What was the question again?
Act 3, I think that happened. And then I think they actually pull it off in Act 4, or else the end of Act 3, I can't remember. The question was, what was the play that Hamlet had put on? Basically the mousetrap. The play is the thing wherein I will catch the conscience of the king. Why does Hamlet not kill Claudius when he finally gets the opportunity?
Because he was praying and he didn't want to send him.
Yeah, he was praying and that wasn't good enough if you killed him in the midst of prayer and sent him to heaven. Now, Hamlet misinterprets that moment because Claudius can't pray. So if Hamlet would have just killed Claudius there, checkmate, game over. But his conscience kicked in. Although his conscience kicked in a dark way there. You know, he did not do it out of gentleness or tenderness. He didn't do it out of, it wasn't intense enough for his need for revenge. Or you could say Hamlet was still making excuses at that point. But 5 minutes later, who does he kill? His first body.
Laertes? No.
Polonius. Polonius is the first in Hamlet's body count. I think you guys know this stuff. Okay. So, now this part here, guys, you might want to pay attention to. There's a short quote from each of like 5 of the major thematic speeches that are given throughout this play. So you'll read this quote, and you got to kind of tell me like why it's significant, how it fits into the play, what it has to do with the play, who says it, if you can remember. So, the first one's pretty easy. Pretty easy. To be or not to be, that is the question. So that quote would be relevant because it's part of the most famous of all Hamlet's, let alone Shakespeare's soliloquies. Yes, we discussed that. It could be a speech about to be a person of action or not to be. And it could also be interpreted as to exist or to cease to exist, to take one's own life. So that one is where Hamlet really pounds out the difficulties of life, the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to, conscience making cowards of us all those great things that are in there. Alas, poor Yorick. That speech is all about really the quintessence of dust. Hamlet holding the skull up, going back to the memory holding the seat in this distracted globe. The infinite jest. The graveyard scene. Ophelia's funeral is about to hit. Hamlet's life has about a few hours left in it. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Now, you probably won't remember who said that. It's actually Marcellus. Yeah, very minimal character.
Wasn't he one of the guards
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning?
You would think Hamlet would have said it, but yeah, it was Marcellus. He was one of the guards,
Like
yes.
when Hamlet was chasing him?
Yes. Right.
How do you spell it?
So you should write down that Marcellus says that quote.
How do you
Some
spell it?
Marcellus. And that's the whole quote about, basically, there's something rotten going on. Okay, I got to power through these because we are almost out of time. So, the next quote is, there are things of heaven and earth, Horatio, there are more things of heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And that's about Hamlet kind of contradicting Horatio's rational worldview. And that's a famous quote. I just saw that in Haunting of Hill House. One of the characters said that. Frailty, thy name is woman. Hamlet says that during one of his speeches when he's going off. And he's basically talking about his frustration towards women, which is really his frustration towards his mom. Which is really his frustration towards men, because he talks about how women bring men into this world, and that's the thing they do. And then the last one is about their special providence in the fall of the sparrow. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all let be. That's that whole speech where Hamlet, right before he goes in to take on the Laertes, is when he's saying he's letting go. There's also going to be 2 mini essays and then a bigger essay. And one of them is about whether or not, in your opinion, Hamlet is really crazy or if he's just acting like he's crazy. The other one's about fate, the question of fate in the play. And then the last one's just about the character of Hamlet, reflecting on that character. If anybody wants to take a look at those essays, you can. I'm going to let you look at it right now.
I just realized what you wrote for